choices. In week 3 we had just used 8, flat 7, and 5. For this week we're going to add the 6th, which is concert G. So students will play high B flat, A flat, G, and F. And they will also memorize the head to Tenor Madness by John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins. And there's the link. So the next step after learning the higher half of the mix of the concert B flat Mixolydian scale is to just play the ascending concert B flat Mixolydian scale. So starting at the bottom and going up, the ascending concert B flat Mixolydian scale. So that's all they're going to play this week, but they're going to understand the form of 12-bar blues and apply the Mixolydian scale to the other 2 chords, which are 4 and 5. In this case, concert E flat and concert F. And they'll play the B flat ascending Mixolydian scale in half notes from memory. I will not expect them to play the E flat or the F Mixolydian scales. I think that would be getting a little bit too complex too quickly. So in this week, they are going to play all 3 Mixolydian scales that represent the roots to each of the chords found in the concert B flat 12-bar blues. So students will learn a little bit about Roman numeral analysis, and they will identify the root by counting up from 1. So I'll provide to them that B flat is 1, obviously, and they'll count up 1, 2, 3, 4, B flat, C, D, E flat, to identify that E flat is the root of the 4 chord and F is the root of the 5 chord. And I'm going to have them write out the Mixolydian scale in B flat, E flat, and F in 8th notes, just the Mixolydian scale going up. And the reason I'm doing that in 8th notes is so that it fills up exactly 1 measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 measure for each, or 1 Mixolydian scale for each measure, just going up. So the first 4 measures will all be the exact same, the concert B flat Mixolydian, and then it'll change to the E flat Mixolydian in measure 5 when that chord appears. So in this assessment, the students are playing the 3 scales separately from each other. They're not playing them with the backing track. They're just playing them from memory at quarter note equal, or in quarter notes at quarter note equals 120 separately from each other. So the 2 students need to understand that the 2 notes that typically define a chord are the 3rd and the 7th. In the case of the Mixolydian scale, the third is the same as the major scale, and the 7th is the same as the minor scale. So that's what makes the Mixolydian scale unique, is that the 3rd is 2 whole steps above the tonic, and the 7th is 1 whole step below the tonic, which that's the only mode for which that's the case. So students will have a sheet that has the 3rd and the 7th in half notes, representing each chord in the concert B flat 12-bar blues. And again, for each of these sheets, they'll be provided the chord symbols below each chord change. So for the first 4 measures, they'll have B flat, concert B flat 7, or whatever their transposition instrument key is. And then starting at measure 5, they would have the E flat 7. So the students must play the 3rds and 7th to each chord with the backing track. The 5 chord only appears once, so they'll only have 1 chance to play that. That's in measure 9. So now we're going to, after we went to 3rds and 7ths, we're going to review all 3 of these scales, just ascending, not descending, just ascending. And this is the first time we're having them improvise using the full scale. I'd like to hear them play the 3rd and 7th of each chord at least once when that chord appears. It'll be easy to do this with the B flat. dominant seventh because that chord appears so many times. It won't be as easy with E flat or F because those two chords appear fewer times in the concert B flat 12-bar blues progression. Now we're starting with descending motion, so playing the sevenths and the thirds, also in half notes. We're just going to do a little discussion about descending motion versus ascending motion. And the students will practice the Mixolydian scales that they wrote in ascending motion, but this time they will write them in descending motion, starting at the top and going down. So as a teacher, I would provide the students with the list of whole steps and half steps for descending Mixolydian scales, so that that'll make it easier for them to write out the concert B flat, concert E flat, and concert F Mixolydian scales, starting at the top of the scale and going down. Students will play the sevenths and the thirds in half notes because this represents descending motion. I'll discuss with them this week that descending motion and ascending motion are the two most distinguishable types of linear motion in jazz improvisation. Linear motion meaning motion going up by step, which visually looks like a line, I guess, in sheet music. So students will have a listening assessment, which I think that was one area that throughout this curriculum I underrepresented was listening, because that's a very important to jazz improvisation. But in this case, they will have a listening assessment where they will have to identify points during the recording of this transcription, Sonny Rollins' Tenor Madness, because that's what they're playing. That's the head that they're learning. They'll have to come up with examples of ascending motion and descending motion. And the YouTube link provided shows a visual of a transcription to Sonny Rollins' solo of Tenor Madness. So to keep it a little bit simpler, students are going to play these scales in quarter notes, starting at the top and going down, because they're not as familiar with playing scales or the Mixolydian scale in descending motion. For the concert F descending Mixolydian scale, because that only is worth one measure, and playing it in quarter notes wouldn't get them to the bottom of the scale, we'll just kind of cheat a little bit and have the F chord go into measure 10, which is typically a 4 chord in the 12-bar blues, but it would also work out as a 5 chord. So we'll do that so that students can finish all 3 descending scales in quarter notes. Oops. So in this week, we're just going to get them to play the Mixolydian scale, starting at the top and going down a little bit faster. So last week, they were assessed on playing the 3 descending scales in quarter notes at quarter note equals 120. This week, they'll gradually increase the tempo by 10 clicks each time they go through until we get up to 180. Once we get to 180, we're going to drop it down to 90, but have them play the descending Mixolydian scales in eighth notes, so that each Mixolydian scale lasts exactly one measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. I don't know if I'm singing the right pitches, but you get what I'm saying. So we're going to discuss that eighth notes really are the driving force behind jazz improvisation, and that's why we're going to play most of our studies in eighth notes, because if you listen to any of the jazz giants, Coltrane, Parker, Miles Davis, any of those people, the foundation of their improvisational ideas are eighth notes, eighth note patterns. So they'll be assessed on their ability to play the descending Mixolydian scales in eighth notes at 90 beats per minute, as opposed to in quarter notes at 180. So this is where things get a little tricky. We're going to combine ascending and descending motion. For this, each odd-numbered measure in the 12-bar blues will be an ascending Mixolydian scale. Each even-numbered measure will be a descending Mixolydian scale. This will be in eighth notes, and because this is trickier, we're going to slow it down to 60 beats per minute. So 30 clicks slower than the last week, which was only descending. So because this is a really complex thing, this is gonna be the main focus for this week, for this week 13 as well as week 12. So this time it's going to be actually the opposite of the previous week, where all the odd numbered measures were ascending and the even numbered measures were descending. So this time, measure 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 will all start at the top of the scale and go down. And the even numbered measures will do the opposite. And the reason for that is just to really reinforce to students all the many, many options for jazz improvisation, even using such a short chord progression like the 12-bar blues.